The war between the Terran Coalition and the Zyvarian Empire had lasted for nearly a decade. Neither side had gained the upper hand. Planets had burned, fleets had been shattered, millions had died, but neither the humans nor the Zyvarians had surrendered. Until today. The Zyvarians, an advanced and regal species known for their bioluminescent skin and strict caste system, had never entertained negotiations with humans. But as resources dwindled and both sides faced the terrifying prospect of an endless war, the Empress of Zyvaria had made a shocking proposal. A marriage alliance between her daughter, Princess Seria, and a human diplomat. Which was how James Carter, a Terran ambassador, found himself standing in the Grand Throne Hall of Zyvaria, staring at the tall, silver-skinned princess who was about to become his wife. Seria was stoic, unreadable, her glowing violet eyes betraying no emotion. James straightened his uniform, cleared his throat, and muttered, "Well, this is awkward." Seria arched an eyebrow. "I would say it is necessary." The Zyvarian priest stepped forward. The war would end tonight. And neither of them had a choice. Chapter 2. A Marriage of Duty. The ceremony was swift, filled with ancient Zyvarian customs James barely understood. He recited vows in a language he had just learned yesterday, placed a nanite-infused ceremonial ring on Seria's finger, and stood as the binding ritual connected their DNA in the eyes of Zyvarian law. The symbolism was clear. Humanity and Zyvaria were now one. As the last words were spoken, the galaxy watched in silence. Across both civilizations, the news flashed across every screen. The war is over. The princess and the human are one. Seria turned to him. "Now," she said smoothly, "we pretend to be in love for the cameras." James forced a charming grin. "Should I call you darling now?" Seria exhaled sharply. "I would prefer you do not." And just like that their married life began. Chapter 3. Learning to be a husband. James had imagined many difficult assignments in his career as a diplomat. But playing husband to an alien princess while navigating the complex politics of a post-war empire, this was a nightmare. The Zyvarian palace was massive, filled with watchful eyes and hidden agendas. Seria, as heir to the throne, was constantly scrutinized, and James, now labeled as prince consort, was expected to learn and obey Zyvarian traditions. His days were spent in formal meetings, his evenings filled with tedious rituals and endless etiquette lessons. Seria, for her part, remained professional, never cold but always distant. "You don't have to do this," James told her one night. "I know you don't want this marriage any more than I do." She paused, her violet eyes unreadable. "You are mistaken," she said softly. "I do not despise this arrangement as much as I expected to." James frowned. What?" Seria turned away. "Nothing." But something had shifted. Chapter 4. The First Sparks. Weeks turned into months. James grew accustomed to Zyvarian customs, and Seria began to show glimpses of warmth. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony overlooking the capital city, she spoke without her usual formality. "I once believed humans to be lesser," she admitted. "Crude, impulsive." James smirked. "And now?" Seria hesitated. "Well, I am not so certain. It wasn't much. But it was the first crack in the walls between them." Chapter 5. An assassination attempt changes everything. The peace had not pleased everyone. A faction of Zyvarian hardliners, furious at their empire's submission to humanity, had plotted against Seria and James. And one night they struck. The attackers breached the palace, moving swiftly through the halls. Their target, Princess Seria. James had never been a soldier, But he had lived through enough war zones to sense danger before it arrived. When the first assassin lunged at Seria, James tackled her to the ground just as the blade sliced through the air where she had stood. "Guards!" he roared, grabbing a fallen enemy's weapon. Seria, stunned for only a moment, drew her own blade. They fought side by side, fending off the attackers until reinforcements arrived. When the last assassin fell, Seria turned to James, her breath uneven, her expression shaken. "You saved me," she whispered. James scoffed, wincing at a cut on his arm. "Yeah, well, isn't that what husbands do?" Seria did something unexpected. She stepped closer, and for the first time she kissed him. Not for the cameras, not for the public, for herself. Chapter 6. No longer pretend. The morning after the attack, Seria was different. She watched James with something new in her gaze. Something raw, something real. That night, she came to his chambers. "You risked your life for me," she said, stepping closer. James exhaled. "Of course I did." Seria hesitated. Then softly, "I do not want this to be a political arrangement anymore." James froze. "Seria, are you saying?" She reached for his hand, interlacing her fingers with his. "I want this to be real, James Carter." His heart pounded. For so long, this marriage had been a performance. Duty. But now it was a choice. And James chose her. He cupped her face, pulling her into a real kiss. "I think," he murmured against her lips, "I wanted that too." Chapter 7. The Future of Two Worlds. News spread quickly. The marriage that had once been a political necessity had become something more. When James and Seria stood before the Galactic Assembly, they stood as equals, as partners, not just in diplomacy but in life. And when Seria called him my husband, there was no longer any pretense. 'Cause it was true. Epilogue. The legend of the human prince. Years later, the story would be told in two civilizations. The tale of the human diplomat who married an alien princess to end a war, and fell in love along the way. Some called it political genius. Others called it destiny. But James, he called it the best damn decision he'd ever made.